let the devil out. You threatened Vanessa. And that is something I cannot forgive. Hell's Kitchen Low! It's the F and Nerd Show, and today we are talking about Daredevil. And I am first going to talk about miscellaneous Daredevil, also mainly because I have a lot of thoughts about this show. I rewatched all of OG Daredevil before Born Again, and so I wanted to talk mostly about this one aspect in my head. Like, everybody's talked about Daredevil, everybody's talked about Netflix Daredevil, and everybody's talking about Daredevil Born Again, which I will at the end of this video. But what is one thing people aren't talking about so much? What is one angle that I, myself, Justice Seymour, on the F and Nerd Show can tackle? Well, Daredevil and, I don't know, toxic masculinity? I don't know. Let's take a look. Don't click off if you're scared. This ain't woke. This is just clickbait. And also, an interesting dissection. Like, almost like a Freudian, in a sense, dissection of, like, Daredevil, Matt Murdock, Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and also a character who is very prominent in this new season of Daredevil, at least the first two episodes, Dex Poindexter. Ben Poindexter, who plays Bullseye. So we'll take a look. Let's take a look. Okay, so look. Matt Murdock. What happens to him? He starts out as a kid with a father who's a boxer. Very masculine guy. Very boxer. Very, just New York-y, hey, guy. But he loves his son, little Matt Murdock. Matt saves a guy from a toxic waste truck, gets himself blinded, and gets super senses akin to like sonar, but different. It's like he can feel the environment around him, and it allows him to do spectacular things that even people with sight couldn't even do. So yeah, very cool. Love Daredevil. And also what I like about Daredevil is, and we're going to just touch on this a little bit, is the idea of, like, people compare him to Batman, but he's way cooler than Batman. Way more complex, I think, than Batman even. Because Batman is a rich guy who, had a very terrible personal tragedy, yes. But, like, as far as what a rich guy can do, being a Batman is kind of, short-sighted. Matt Murdock is an effed up individual. And what I love about the Netflix show and Defenders, especially, like, I haven't even rewatched Defenders, but there are so many clips in Defenders where it's like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist. But Iron Fist is kind of like, in fact, he's like, I want to be him. I want to be like Daredevil. But Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, who are a little bit more, like, level-headed in some sense, if not cynical, are like, what the fudge is this guy's deal? Why is he like to dress up like a devil and beat up people? And that's pretty much the vibe of Daredevil. Everybody but Daredevil kind of sees the value of Daredevil until, for some strange reason, his presence is justified, which I like. What I also like is, like, he knows he shouldn't be doing this, and that is why he's dressed up as the devil. Like, he is so religious, he is so Catholic, that he feels guilty, that he just feels such a rage within him that he wants to beat people up. And he justifies it by beating up criminals who do very, very bad things, and he kind of dresses up as a devil to sort of scare them, like, don't do this again, or the devil will come find you. Which is so cool. There's something about it, like, I don't know what it is. I really don't know what the essence is about Matt Murdock / Daredevil. Like, it's so, like, ironic, like, 90s Nirvana, but different. It's like not even Nirvana. It's like cooler than Nirvana even. Not even trying to trash on Nirvana. I'm just saying it's like post post irony. Not even post irony. It's even beyond that. I don't even know that if that's even a real thing. I'm just saying words now at this point. But anyway, the reason I'm talking about the toxic masculinity thing is, like I said, everybody thinks Matt Murdock is a crazy person in some way, shape, or another. And what I like about this is, like, Matt, Fisk, and many other characters in the show, throughout the show, represent different levels of this sort of intense, sort of toxic masculinity. I'm not trying to... Don't click away, please. Anyway, what I love about the first season of Daredevil is how similar Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk's childhoods were, in a sense. Like, they had these strong father figures who were, like, sort of teaching them things and leading them along the way. But while both were very tough and being, like, bravado-ish, they showed it in a very different light, and so they both got it in a different way. And what I like about how Vincent D'Onofrio betrays Wilson Fisk is he is almost like an extreme tough guy trapped in sort of like an abused little boy's body. And so the way he talks, the way, it's this growl. It's almost like this tough guy is just trying to beat itself out of the little boy. Like, it's trying to literally come out and be like every time he speaks, it's hard for him because it's so uncomfortable for him to do. But it feels like a necessary evil. And I really like that aspect. What else about this? So, yes, strong father figures, different angles. Matt's father got murdered. Wilson murdered his father. Tomato. No, not really. What I also like is, so, how the different aspects of how they sort of... The way that Battling Jack Murdock handles the blindness of his son is so strong in such a virtuous way that I think is so undervalued in the show. Like, he is just a boxer, and he hoped for the best for his son, and then his son gets blinded, and now, while he doesn't have the best prospects in life, he has to now try to help guide his son to build a better life than what he already has. And I love that sort of aspect of it. And so he, in a good way, sort of helps him, ride with his blindness. And then, in turn, Matt, having to ride with his blindness, teaches Jack to sort of be like a better, not just a better father, but also a better fighter in a sense. And sort of they have like a very intimate, great sort of relationship. And the inverse of that is Wilson Fisk and his father, and how his father would just have him be like, here, stare at the wall and think about the man you want to be. And that's why Wilson has this weird infatuation with the painting that Vanessa made of that white, it's just white. And it reminds him of that wall that his father made him look into, and reminded him of the man he wanted to be. And I think there's an interesting sense into that. And I think there's an interesting sense into, also, the relationships that these two men carry with the women in their lives. And they're both very different. Fisk with Vanessa, let's start with his mother. So Fisk with his mother. His mother is alive in an old folks home, perhaps a little too overprotective, helped him cover up the murder of the father, etc. and so forth. He puts her in an old folks home and just sort of like, whatever. That's just how she lives. I don't know if she's happy. She seems like she was losing it a little bit, which is, and the place she was at looked nice. So, and Ben Urich himself said, hey, this is out of my price range, so it had to be nice. Vanessa. Now we're going to get into Vanessa. I'm very interested into the aspect of both what Wilson thinks of Vanessa and what Vanessa thinks of Wilson and how their relationship dynamic really works. I also think that something Born Again is starting to bloom into, and I think that is juicy. One aspect is like, so Vanessa would talk about this man that she was so infatuated with who wore a white suit, and then Wilson wanted to wear a white suit, and then she sort of knows what the Kingpin is sort of into and what he's doing, but she pretends she doesn't, and Wilson is just sort of, he's trying to pretend he's normal, and I think there's something interesting about that dynamic. Like, her sort of allowing him to feel like he is normal. Now, I'm not saying he's not normal, but he's obviously not normal. He's, like, crazy. But whatever. I think it's, like, they have, like, it's a relationship for sure. But, like, I am always so wondering, like, how much does Vanessa really love Wilson Fisk? I really don't know. But I think that's what makes it juicy. Because there's even a line she says to Dex in season 3. She's like, oh yeah, he likes displaying beautiful things. Like, she feels like a trophy wife. And I think that's interesting. And it does morph into more than that, but I'm not getting into that. What, next up. So let's get into Matt Murdock and his many lady relationships. I'm not even going to get into the She-Hulk one, even though I love it. But let's talk about how he sort of deals with women, because I think Matt has a complicated way with women also. So I got this list of the women he loved and the women he liked, and it's very interesting. He loves Elektra. He only likes Karen and Claire. And I think that's so juicy, especially because Karen is head over heels infatuated, loves Matt Murdock. And he just kind of likes her because he doesn't trust her or like her enough to let her in any sense, even when she does know he is Daredevil. So I love that idea. Whereas with Elektra, even though it is a little more shallow emotionally, he can be his most raw, Daredevil-y self. And I thought, wow, that's cool beans. And I think it's a very interesting, like, dynamic. Like, the relationship dynamics in this show are, like, really juicy if you really get into them. And with Claire, the thing with Claire is Claire does not like him being Daredevil. Like, I don't know. Claire's complicated because Claire does kind of like Luke Cage, but Luke Cage kind of does it different compared to Daredevil. Daredevil hides behind a mask. He likes beating up people. Luke Cage does kind of more community service. He kind of more cleans up the streets. Daredevil, I mean, he cleans up the streets, but it's a little more than that. Personally, I guess that's something that means something to her. I think that's valid. What else? Potential. I put potential question mark. Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones, well, I don't know if they could have dated. I think they could have been like a match. Not like, I don't think they would have loved each other head over heels, like, oh my god, I love you so much, like what Daredevil and Elektra does. But I do think Matt could emotionally attach to Jessica Jones just a little bit more than he could to Karen, whereas, but I don't know, but the thing is, I don't know if Jessica Jones would ride with him being Daredevil. But the thing is, Daredevil would be so cool that you keep justifying that he is Daredevil wearing the Daredevil suit all the time. So, I don't know. That's why I put potential there, because I do kind of see a world, but I'm not going to get into that. Now, let's talk about Frank Castle. Okay, so Matt and Fisk both have these different ideas of masculinity, and both of them aren't necessarily the most healthy, but there are definitely varying degrees of health. Frank Castle, he represents, and I love what I wrote, the ultimate mask. Like, while Daredevil wears the cowl of Daredevil, it is a sometimes thing. It allows him to sort of, imbue that essence and then take it off and then be Matt Murdock for the day, in the daylight and whatever. Uh, and Fisk, kind of similar deal. Like, Fisk is very segmented. There's Fisk, the crime boss. There's Fisk with Vanessa. There's Fisk by himself. There's Fisk with his inner circle. And there's Fisk when he's manipulating people or power playing people. Frank Castle is all id. Frank Castle is what happens when you just don't give a flip anymore. In a sense, like, what I love a lot about this show is how it deals with Karen and how she sort of views justifying murder, because it's an interesting idea, right? It's like, well, Daredevil doesn't kill people, but he does beat the fudge out of them, and that's what kind of makes it a little weird. But the reason he does it is because he does think once they get out the hospital and have thought about what they've done after the 8 to 10 months of healing and physical therapy, they will, maybe change their mind to become a better person. Frank Castle's like, you can't change anyone's mind. If anybody has the potential of being the worst evil, they're going to maintain that essence, and it's never going to end. But Matt would then come back and be like, but, even if they maintain that part of evil, there's still things in their lives and aspects of themselves that are positive. And if you kill them, you take out, they're evil, but also the good. And you gotta sort of weigh, like, is that worth taking out that evil? And Frank just doesn't care anymore. And the reason he doesn't care anymore is because he has nothing left to lose. They killed his entire family in front of him. And there's a speech when he's talking to Red, Daredevil. He's like, man, Red, I love my daughter, all this stuff. When she saw me when I came back from the war, she hugged me so tight, I couldn't breathe. And then he talked about, like, there was meat coming out of her. That sucked, dude. So sad, man. And then when you think about that, and then, like, even when Matt hears that, like, at first when Matt's like, you can't ever kill people. And even though he doesn't agree, you can't tell Frank Castle that he's wrong. You just can't. And because of that, because he exists, he believes that he must snuff out others that exist as him. And that's why it's so good. It's so similar to Daredevil's ideology, but it's way more permanent and way more disruptive in a way. And I think it's something that you want. Now, let's talk about Dex. Dex, Ben Poindexter, is basically, he grew up, it's like a meld of Wilson Fisk and Daredevil's childhood. He had a father, very macho, grew up in a sport, baseball, obsessed with the sport, and he was like, I have to go pro so my dad will love me. And so he basically is obsessed with becoming like the perfect pitcher, and he is the perfect pitcher of any object, for any velocity and any range almost. But because of that, it leads to him, as a child, murdering his coach, which, that's where it F's up his baseball career forever. But what I love about Dex is because it is a tragedy for him. He is the most tragic character in probably season 3 of Daredevil, because he is a little crazy and he is a little unhinged, but at the point you see him in the show, yes, he's stalking a woman, but when you find out, like, when he eventually does confront her, and this is all before Wilson Fisk even intervenes with him, necessarily with her, when Dex finally talks to Julie, the woman he's been stalking, and they go on the date, all that jazz, and then she finds out that he's basically been stalking her, And then he comes back and he apologizes, and then she's sort of like willing to hear him out and all that jazz. All that was Dex. All that was on his own. He got a job at the FBI. He was maintaining a job at the FBI. He had a nice apartment. He was like maintaining a life, even with his mental illness. And he was doing mostly okay. Besides, the murdering as an FBI agent. But, that's something to dissect separate. I don't know anything about that. But then, when Fisk and Matt are put into his life, they ruin him. And I think they both kind of ruin him in a similar sense, because Fisk basically kind of takes him in as like a son and basically manipulates him and pretends to be his father because he relates to his childhood. Matt, even when he is trying to get Dex on his side against Fisk, he is relishing in it, and he's not really empathetic to the life that Dex had that led up to that point, which is sad. And so I do empathize with how Dex feels at the end when he sort of like is like F everybody. And what I like about this is, so he relates to Fisk's childhood, but then Fisk puts him in the Daredevil suit, and so he gets to feel the power of the suit, the power of letting out your wildest fantasies through this other guy. And that's what makes him so dangerous, because then he's like, oh, I'm Daredevil. Brr. Hey, Karen. So terrible, so scary, so scary. I love Bullseye. Bullseye's like, when I heard Bullseye was going to be in Season 3, I was like, how the fudge are they going to do that? Is it going to look bad? And also, when Season 3 of Daredevil came out, that's when all the cancellations were happening, too. And I was just like, God dang it. Please don't be bad. And Season 3 is, like, the best season. Literally, the best season. Anyway. Now I want to talk about, like, the role that a lot of these women play in these people's lives. Because I think there's an interesting idea of like how these men look at the women in their lives. Vanessa sort of mentioned being like, feeling like kind of like a trophy wife, feeling like a beautiful thing for this to display. And then I think of Elektra and how the Hand and Stick and the Chosen or whatever thought of her as like the black sky. She basically, Elektra represented like the most untamable woman, basically. Like, oh, she's so wild, you could not possibly tame her. I think that's an interesting aspect to look into. Karen, I gotta stop the camera and start a new video because Karen's a whole thing. Let's talk about Karen. So, Karen, her backstory is sort of seeded out throughout the entire show. It's pretty good. And the reveal is very tragic, very sad, and like, every time I see the Karen episode, I sort of like, and I think this is on purpose, I'm always just in awe of like, oh my god, she was a mess, but I would argue a somewhat justified mess. And I don't even want to say it's because of toxic masculinity, but also because of patriarchal, like, expectations. Basically, spoilers for the Karen backstory episode. What happens is, you sort of see, back in the day, she was living in a super small town, even smaller than Twin Peaks. I had to. But really small. Like, even worse than a blink, then you miss it. It's like, half blink, you missed it. And her father and brother are stuck there after the death of their mother. And she sort of stopped, she didn't go to college because of the death of their mother. She sort of took on the responsibilities of their mother because she felt like they expected her to. And also, not only that, she didn't think they could handle those things, which is arguable, but I don't know. Uh, but also she had a very bad problem with drugs, the nose stuff, and I thought that was interesting. So much so that like she had like nosebleeds and stuff. Like she had like issues, and she had a drug dealer boyfriend, which was interesting. And also like expect like not only a drug dealer boyfriend, but like a hippie kind of drug dealer boyfriend who can also beat up people. It's like, oh, she has a type, because Daredevil very much sort of like scratches that itch in a sense, in a more virtuous sense, but still very similar. I do think there is a big like theme there about like the idea of her feeling trapped, and I think it's a big. I'm gonna tie it into this. Maggie, Daredevil's mother, that you sort of find in season 3, and that sort of aspect of feeling trapped. Because more spoilers for season 3, minor, whatever. I don't know if they're big. She's a nun, and sort of feeling trapped and doing that, and what she did with Jack Murdock and how Matt came to be and all that jazz. And like Maggie is a more interesting character than I think she's given credit for already. Mainly because she is like a perfect mirror for Matt's thing, but like kind of different. It's like she did her thing and then she had to go back because she was so tied to that religion, tied to her sense of what she thought was good. And Matt, and then at a certain point after that, sort of using that toxically and sort of using her nunhood to not reach out, which I thought is so complex, and so juicy and good storytelling, whatever. Uh, and I think how that parallels to Matt's relationship to his sense of being Daredevil is cool. And I'm relaying now back to Karen and her sense of duty of helping with these certain aspects with her father and brother, and how that resentment in her built and then eventually avalanched into the death of her brother, ostracization from her father, and having to move to New York where she eventually meets Matt and Foggy. Uh, very tragic character, Karen Page, and it all the more tragic moving forward. I'm gonna get back to Maggie again a little later. I'll do it now. So Maggie with the original sin. I wanted to say that original sin because that sounds very biblical and it is Daredevil after all. But her idea, I like. I like her idea of like imagine this sense of being a nun who went out, got with a boxer, had a baby, and then got major postpartum depression from that. Kind of resented everything you did up to that point. Going back to nunhood. Uh, and then when you're back in your nunhood, the guy you had a baby with died. And your son got blinded. And now your son is the devil of Hell's Kitchen. I love that. Like, that's such interesting ideas there. And so, like, and that's why I say original sin. Because, like, if you're in Maggie's shoes, everything from Daredevil Season 1, 2, and Season 3, when it comes to even, you know, everything that goes down to the church, she must feel like it was her fault, in a sense. I think that's so juicy. Okay, now Claire. I want to talk about Claire because the comic book character she sort of plays is Night Nurse, which is cool, but also what I like about it is like how Daredevil sort of uses Claire in a sense, uh, and how Claire basically is like, "Hey, I'm not your night nurse. Leave me alone. I'm not gonna just enable you to damage yourself and do this thing." Uh, and I think that's a very interesting idea of like, and also kind of parallel to what Kingpin was doing with Vanessa. Like, I don't know, like the idea of like Matt and Wilson Fisk trying to replace their mothers with the women, and then like what those women represent to them, and how that each touches back to whatever, I don't know, the themes or what, I don't have to know. I'm rambling. Netflix Daredevil is really good. And now I'm going to talk about Born Again and a little bit about the themes and how that ties in, but mostly just a review of new Netflix Daredevil Born Again. Daredevil Born Again. I was worried going into this show and then watching the first episode. And I'm not 100% not worried, but I am optimistic that it is going to at least feel like a new season of Daredevil. I think it's going to feel coherent. I think it's going to feel like a story. I think there's a plot to it. That's so vague and so nothing. Spoilers for Daredevil Born Again in 3, 2, 1. I have to say spoilers because, of course, they killed Foggy Nelson. And that is something I cannot forgive. In a sense. But also I can forgive it only because we've seen Foggy do a lot, and Bullseye has to kill somebody that Daredevil loves, and since Elektra was killed by somebody else, we have to think and see Bullseye die. Or not Bullseye die, but see Bullseye kill somebody that Daredevil loves really much. And I also loved how he was like, why? And then he just threw him off the roof. I love that, and I would have done the same goddamn thing. How dare you, Franklin Nelson is such a good goddamn lawyer and a good man, and he didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve that at all. And that's a sadness when you do something like this, when you have superheroes. And I think that's obviously the point, is like, the ones closest to them can die terrible, violent deaths, no matter how long you spent with them. And oh well, this is just how the train goes. I do just hope it's justified. I think it will be. I am anytime, and this is so like they tried to do the oneer. Watching it a second time, I liked it better. I still don't love it. I'm more like we don't need a oneer in the first episode, and I'd much rather everything be practical. Or not even every, and so I understand this is Disney, Marvel, Daredevil. So okay, not everything has to be practical. Okay, I don't do me no rubber bodies. I don't need too many rubber bodies. But I also liked in that oneer, as I'm trashing on it. So like, Franklin Foggy Nelson is shot, and as they're sort of fighting through, it's filling up with smoke, really, but it's fog. It's foggy, and I think it's an interesting way to sort of keep the idea of Foggy in your head, and also you're hearing his heartbeat the entire time, and you're hearing Karen freaking out the entire time. That's sort of the one time I like how they've done Daredevil hearing things. In Daredevil, the Netflix show, him hearing things, very simple. Just give him like a close-up or let him just turn his head and be like, hear the thing. This one is doing a little too much, being like, oh, let's zoom in but over his shoulder. Listen over here. Let's zoom in over his shoulder. Listen over here. It's a little too much. But other than that, not too upset. But I'm also like, if you're just going to do that, if you want to try and do something that looks fancy and expensive, just do the stupid sonar vision thing. Don't want to do that? Just be a little cheaper then. Just do the... Okay, thank you. the best aspects of Daredevil and the best aspects of like the sort of like Catholic like repression. I love when Matt Murdock is just struggling to keep it in. Like you just see him wanting to unleash, yearning to unleash, to let the devil out. And what I love about these first two episodes, like the first episode with the half red light, uh, I was like, oh. And then at the end of this second episode, when he beats the fudge out of those guys, which one guy looked like he could have died. I hope he didn't die. Uh, and he's like, ah! So cool. So cool. And like, there's a point in season 3 of Daredevil when Kingpin is telling Dex is in good nature to let out a primal scream. And throughout season 3, well, throughout all the show, Daredevil, Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock especially, he's like, ah! Which I love. I'm not trying to be too loud for my neighbors, but yeah. What else? Yeah, what I do like about the show is, first of all, they're saying the F word a lot, which Daredevil didn't even do in Netflix, because it's a weird thing. They just show a guy get shot 2 inches in front of his face with a shotgun, but they couldn't say the F word. But this, they're saying the F word, there's blood, and it looks like it was on purpose this time, as opposed to Echo, when it looked like it was sort of like an afterthought. And the thing is, like, all you need to capture, and I think it's the most important aspect of the show to me, is that primal rage. Primal rage. Like, it is like, so, it like, I don't know how he channels that, but when he's like, spectacular. Spectacular. Okay, and also I liked when Wilson Fisk and Vanessa had the couples therapy. That was fun. Anyway, that's all I'm saying about Daredevil and Daredevil Born Again. I'll probably try to cut together the Born Again thing as a separate thing. And I'll still probably include it in this overall Daredevil talk. But that was my long-winded Daredevil talk about Daredevil and masculinity and what it all means and blah, blah, blah. The end. Like, comment, subscribe. Goodbye. Let the devil out.